There are things that everybody knows that they also know they're not supposed to say. And for our elites in Washington, one of those things that nobody is supposed to say is how the money laundering scheme works. And it works like this, because I'm not an elite and I can say whatever I want. Money goes to preferred entities from lawmakers and bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., and then those entities return some of that money to the politicians and the bureaucrats in order to ask for even more money in the future. And it's just corrupt as all hell. And I would like to give big kudos to Fox News. I don't actually watch Fox News, but they have a newish host named Steve Hilton who called this out. And then the other thing we're not supposed to talk about, the implicit corruption of having a revolving door between partisan politics, federal government, and the news media. He called out Marie Harf on that, or rather, I should say, she called herself out. But first, let's get to the corruption angle. Watch this clip.
And again, something that Ukraine should investigate, which is John Kerry's corruption. He was Secretary of State at the time. He was also involved in channeling money to Ukraine. His former Chief of Staff was hired by Burisma soon after Hunter Biden went on the board. They hired John Kerry's former Chief of Staff while he was Secretary of State, paid him money from Burisma, could have come from the US taxpayer. That money is circled back to Democratic senators who then write to the administration calling for more money to be sent to Burisma.
All right, Bill, so there are things that we know that happened involving Joe Biden, his son Hunter Biden, getting tens of thousands of dollars per month from Burisma, probably the most corrupt energy company in Europe. And we know for a fact that John Kerry, while he was Secretary of State, his former Chief of Staff, went to work for the same company. And Marie Harf, who is there the whole time, denies that anything went wrong. But just on the face of it, doesn't this look awful, not just for the Democrats who are involved in all this corruption, but for the Democrats on TV saying that nothing happened?
Well, yeah. And to me, the thing that looks awful is even deeper than that, Steve. It's like, whether you want to call that person a reporter or a newscaster or a commentator, talking head or whatever, the best way I can think of this is to imagine like during Watergate, where Joe Haldeman gets hired for CBS News, let's say, and interviews Woodward and Bernstein, and Woodward and Bernstein say, "Well, there's something really fishy going on there," and Haldeman goes, "Nah, that's okay. I was there.
I was there.
I was there. There's nothing to worry about." This is why we are in such trouble as a country. All of our problems are due to the fact that we do not have a functioning press. Their job is to find out the truth, not cover it up and not to blandly assert that things didn't happen. Now, I know she's not an actual reporter and all the rest of it, but when you talk about this revolving door, I mean, George Stephanopoulos is an ABC News reporter commentator who was the chairman of Bill Clinton's election campaign in 92. And we're supposed to believe that this guy who not only leaned Democratic, who orchestrated Bill Clinton's victory in 92 through media manipulation and all the rest of it. We're supposed to believe that this guy is an impartial arbiter of truth. I mean, I don't even want to get into the details of this story because I think that the entire frame of it is so fundamentally corrupt and wrong that it really does make you ask questions like, what shall we call this thing? It's not news, and it's not reporting, and it's not journalism, but it looks like it, or it's trying to. What is this called?
I know
Fake
exactly
news,
what
I
it's
guess.
called. I call it infotainment.
There you go.
It's not news. It's not entertainment. It's the infotainment industry, and I believe it's corrupt as all hell. Scott, before I get to your question, I want to show you another short clip. This is the actual fireworks between Marie Harf, the former DNC operative and State Department employee, and Steve Hilton. So let's watch.
All of that needs to be investigated. John Kerry's corruption.
There's no evidence to anything you just...
that I've just laid out
I worked
is
at
the
the
evidence.
State Department
so
then.
you're covering up the corruption too. You defend it.
Are you
These
kidding
are
me?
facts. Billions of
Steve,
dollars
I'm on
went
this couch
through
with you
Burisma.
talking about the news. Please don't accuse me of covering something up.
You are,
I'm
because you're
telling
saying
you,
there's no evidence. I've just given you the
I was
evidence.
there, and there's no evidence.
The money...
So Scott, let me give you a little more information on Marie Harf. I've got notes here. Before working for Fox News, she served as director of strategic communications for John Kerry when he was Secretary of State in Obama's second term. She also worked for a bit as acting spokesperson and deputy spokesperson for the State Department. She got her start as a CIA analyst on the Middle East before getting involved in Barack Obama's 2012 re-election effort. And now this is a three-way revolving door. It's not in and out between just the media and government. It's in and out between the government, party politics, and the media. And apparently she had a short stint earlier this year for some failed Democratic presidential contender. You were willing to give her the benefit of the doubt just seeing this short clip. But when you find out what her career actually is, what do you say?
Well, I think you don't really even have to posit anything nefarious to be able to grasp this, because like most other careers, if you're, let's say you're working in Silicon Valley. In
Sure.
Silicon Valley, there's a kind of a little oikos, the Greek word for sort of an extended network. There's this oikos of fellowship among the high tech companies. And you know some people that work at Microsoft, and I know some people that work at Apple, and that guy knows some people that work at, some other tech company. And because of that, it's a very kind of insular community that hires its own often, and people get passed around from one company to another. And the same thing happens in this nexus between the mainstream media, government, and government contractors, is these people just rotate through all of those fields. It's all the same thing to them. Like when Marie Harf is on TV, she's auditioning for a government job. When Marie Harf is standing behind the podium at the State Department, she's auditioning for a TV job. And you didn't even mention how many of these people are actually married to people that are in these related fields. And so it's one of those things where I don't know if you necessarily have to say, well, there's some sort of evil going on here, although I think there should be guidelines in place to prevent the kind of migration of people from one role to another. And I would even say that would include a man who I thought was a great man, Tony Snow. Moving from Fox News to becoming the White House spokesperson. I don't think that any of that looks good for anybody. And I know that the media people, the networks, think it looks good on their sort of credits when they're able to say, well, we had this guy who was a big shot in government, and we've got this guy who was a big shot in government, because that's how they sell all these interviews. To a certain extent, you can make the argument and say, well, these are people who have expertise in these fields. And so certainly you would want to hire somebody who's not an alien from the outside. But maybe a fresh perspective wouldn't hurt at all if they would bring some people in from the outside. And I think in the case specifically related to these charges against Hunter Biden and Joe Biden and John Kerry and John Kerry's chief of staff, Joe Biden, you know how Joe Biden feels about this already. He knows it's a problem because he's already made a public announcement that said, well, when I'm in the White House, when I'm president of the United States, we're not going to have any family members working for foreign corporations and foreign governments and things like that. So that was a clear acknowledgement, if not of guilt, at least of something that said, man, this really looks bad. I need to get out in front of this. And now, unfortunately, he can't get away from what's behind him. And what's behind him is racing very rapidly to catch up to him.
Scott, it's interesting. I thought I knew what I was going to say to close, but you made a really interesting point talking about the private sector. And every industry does have these sort of closed networks where everybody kind of knows everybody else, at least by reputation. The difference is in the private sector. If companies hire strictly on the basis of nepotism or connection rather than your ability to produce, your ability to generate profits, your ability to help the company, then that company is going to go bust. And that kind of puts a natural brake, if you will, on this tendency to hire just based on who you know, because in the private sector, that's not good enough. But when it comes to government and the media, it's self-reinforcing. Instead of having a negative feedback that you would get from a company losing money, you're on a positive feedback loop where the more these connections intertwine, the more tax dollars they're able to harvest away from hardworking Americans and deliver to their favored people. And there's a two-word phrase for this. And when I first heard it, it rankled me, and I kind of I didn't like it. I didn't quite disbelieve it, but it all seemed a little too conspiracy-minded for my taste. And those two words are deep state. But that's exactly what we have. And it's not a conspiracy. There's not a cabal.
No.
There aren't secret meetings or anything else like that. But it is this closed network with a positive feedback loop. And I don't know how to break it. I just know how to expose it, and I suppose it's up to the voters to break it if they can. I think we've got another chance to do that in 2020, so let's get to work on draining that swamp, shall we? And that is your right angle on that, brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. If you like what you see, we would love to have you as a member, as one of our producers, so please click on over and join. We'd love to have you on board. And also, I'd like to mention our friends over at PatriotPost.com, who produce great content, great memes, and we're doing this cross-promotion stuff, and it's really great to be associated with them, even if it's just that I get to say their name at the end of these segments sometimes. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.